I had governed Veldrath for 20 years without confusion. My pack obeyed, my council advised, my borders held. Every variable in my kingdom had a name, a cause, a remedied solution, and I had learned, long before my father's cloak settled on my shoulders, that a king who could not name a thing could not control it. That was the first law of the North. Name what you see, know what you hold. I did not know what to make of Senna. She appeared at the eastern fence of the feeding yard on a morning in early autumn, when the frost had not yet hardened the ground, but the pine trees on the ridge had begun to let go of their needles in long, slow falls. My pack fed at first light 31 wolves, from the great gray seniors to the pups who still stumbled over their own paws, and they had fed at first light every morning for as long as any wolf in Veldrath could remember. The routine was fixed. The pack arrived. The yard opened. They ate. On the morning I first saw her, they did not eat. I was standing at the longhouse window above the yard when I noticed it. The pack had gathered, as always, moving in that loose, unhurried way of wolves who know their place in the order of things, and then they had stopped. Not restlessly, not in alarm. They had simply stopped and turned, all 31 of them, to face the eastern fence. I followed their gaze. A woman stood at the fence. She was not pressing against it, not reaching through the rails to call them, not doing any of the things that people who come to look at the pack usually do. She was simply standing there, the way a stone stands in a river, not trying to redirect anything, not demanding anything shift around her. She wore a plain traveling cloak, dark with old weather and the particular fading that comes from years of honest use rather than neglect. Her hair was pulled back simply. Her hands were at her sides. She was watching the wolves with an expression I could not read from the window. Not wonder exactly, not fear, something quieter than either. My pack watched her back. Then, after a long moment in which nothing happened and the frost breathed between the fence rails, the youngest pup, a gray half-grown male the handlers called Soot, sat down. One by one the rest followed. They did not eat until she turned and walked away. I had my head of yard keep, a good man named Bran, bring me a report by mid-morning. He stood before my table with the particular careful look of a man delivering something he does not understand. She came to the fence at dawn, he said. Didn't call to them, didn't feed them anything through the rails, just stood there. And they did not eat. Not until she left, my lord. Then they went straight to it, no hesitation, ate clean. I looked at him, find out who she is. Her name was Senna. Bran returned with that and very little else because there was very little else to return with. She was not from Veldrath. She was not from any pack holding he could trace in the territory records. She had come from the western reaches, she said, following the work of her hands. She had some knowledge of plants and tending, which she had put to use at farmsteads and settlements along the road. She had no pack name. She had no family claim. She had paid for a room at the Wayfarer's Lodge on the edge of the settlement, and she planned, she had told Bran pleasantly, to stay through the first hard frost and then continue south. She was not seeking an audience with me. She was not seeking work at the keep. She was not, as far as Bran could determine, seeking anything at all. I found this more unsettling than I had expected. Every person who came to Veldrath wanted something. That was not a cynicism. It was simply the arithmetic of a northern trading settlement built at the edge of pack territory. People came because they wanted the safety of the pack's name, or work in the longhouses, or passage through the Ridge Road, or a favor from the Alpha seat. The wanting was ordinary and I had no quarrel with it. I had grown fluent in reading the want in people, the particular lean of someone who needs something, the way the eyes settle on the thing they're moving toward. Senna did not have that lean. I sent for her. She came to my hall the way she had stood at my fence, without hurry, without performance. She was taller than I judged from the window, and there was a quality to the way she moved through the room that I recognized, after a moment, as the quality I had seen in the wolves before a storm. Not stillness exactly, but the absence of unnecessary motion. She crossed to the center of the hall where I receive people who are not yet permitted to approach the seat, and she looked at me the same way she had looked at the pack, that expression I still could not name. Present, unhurried, waiting without urgency. "You stood at my feeding yard this morning," I said. "I did," she said. "I'm sorry if it caused a disruption. I didn't mean to interfere with their routine." "I'll keep my distance." "What were you doing there?" She paused, and I watched her consider the question with genuine thought rather than the manufactured consideration of someone buying time to construct an answer. "I wake early," she said finally. "I was walking. I saw the fence and the yard through the trees, and I heard them moving in there, and I stopped. I don't have a reason beyond that. I've always stopped when there are wolves nearby." "You are not frightened of them?" "No. Most people are." "I know," she said, and the tone was not boastful and not apologetic, simply factual, the way a person states the color of the sky. I studied her. My wolf had gone very quiet in the way that is not peace but attention, the deep, pulled-down attention of something listening hard to a sound it cannot yet identify. I had felt that quality of attention from my wolf before, in years past, during moments of great consequence, before battles, before treaties. I had never felt it in my own hall during a conversation with a woman about a fence. "You will stay off the yard fence," I said. "The pack has a feeding routine and I will not have it disturbed." "Of course," she said. No argument, no wounded look. She accepted it the way she seemed to accept everything without friction. I dismissed her, she left. My wolf watched her go all the way across the hall. She did not go to the fence the following morning. The pack did not eat. Bran came to me at mid-morning again with the same careful look. "They gathered at dawn," he said, "sat in a ring, didn't touch the feed. The handlers waited an hour, nothing. And then one of the younger ones, Kale's female, the russet one, went to the eastern fence and sat there, looking out. After about 20 minutes, the rest followed her and sat in a line along it." I closed my eyes briefly. "Where is the woman?" "At the Wayfarer's Lodge, my lord. She hasn't left the settlement." I was quiet for a moment. My wolf offered nothing helpful. "Tell her," I said, "that she may walk where she pleases." The pack ate within the hour of Senna, passing the fence on her morning walk. Bran reported this without editorial comment, and I received it without any, and neither of us spoke of what it signified because I had no vocabulary for it yet, and I preferred not to name things I did not fully understand. But I began to watch. It is not a quality a king should be proud of, this watching. I'm a practical man. I have dispatched armies and brokered accords and overseen the slow, complicated labor of keeping 31 wolves and a northern settlement in something resembling peace for 2 decades. I do not generally stand at windows watching women walk along fence lines. But the thing my wolf was doing, that deep attentiveness, that listening hard quality, it persisted. It did not ease after the first morning or the second. If anything, it sharpened, the way a blade sharpens against stone, and I found that if I was not watching, I was thinking about what I might see if I were. She walked the same route each morning, past the eastern fence, along the ridge path where the pine needles made the footing soft, down through the settlement's outer market where the earliest traders were setting up their stalls, and back to the lodge. She stopped at the same intervals, not to rest, because she did not seem to tire, but to look at things. A particular stone in the ridge wall that had an interesting fracture. The way frost gathered at the base of the pine trunks. The behavior of a market dog with a limp that she stopped twice to examine with careful hands. On the 4th morning, Marit followed her along the fence line. Marit was my eldest she-wolf. She was 9 years old, which is old for a working pack wolf, and she had the authority of her age in every movement, slow and deliberate, carrying the weight of her years without effort. Marit had been my father's wolf before she was mine, and she had learned from that long association a sovereign's distrust of strangers. In 11 years, I had not seen her approach an unfamiliar human without my command and my presence as sanction. She moved in her own time by her own counsel, and her counsel had been, for 11 years, that strangers were to be watched from a distance. She walked the fence line beside Senna for the length of the eastern run, perhaps 40 yards, and then she stopped at the far post and watched Senna continue up the ridge path. I stood at my window and watched both of them. My wolf was not quiet anymore. It was doing something I had no word for, a kind of vibrating attention, pitched between recognition and restraint. That evening my council met in the long hall. There were 5 of them: Sir Velt, who managed the territory bonds; Councillor Asha, who handled the pack's welfare records; my head of arms Wren, the keeper of the pack's bloodlines, old Tomas, who had catalogued every wolf in Veldrath for 40 years, and my northern trade liaison Petra, who had an eye for everything that might affect the settlement's standing. They were good people. They had governed alongside me without drama for years, and they had earned the right to speak plainly. Asha spoke plainly. "The pack's behavior is irregular," she said, "and the irregularity is tied to the presence of a specific individual, a woman with no pack name, no holding, no verifiable lineage. My lord, the ranking families are already talking." "What are they saying?" I asked. "That the Alpha's wolves have chosen a nobody," Wren said, without inflection. He was not cruel, he was simply precise. "And that if the Alpha's wolves choose her, there is a question of what that means for the Alpha's mate bond." Silence in the hall. "The mate bond," I said, "is my business." "It is also the pack's business," Tomas said gently, in the way of a very old man who has seen many things and believes that gentleness is simply accuracy delivered at a slower pace. "The wolves knew before you did when your father found your mother. They circled the keep for 3 days before he brought her inside. I have the records." I looked at him. "I'm not saying this is the same thing," Tomas said. "I'm saying the pack has a pattern. It is worth considering." "She is a wanderer with no name," Asha said. "The Gret family has sent an envoy. Their eldest daughter is accomplished and well-connected. The Veldmore alliance has been on the table for 2 years. My lord, you cannot allow a woman with no standing to compromise." "I have not done anything," I said. "With regard to this woman, she walks near my fence in the morning. My wolves have opinions about her. Those are the facts. The rest is conjecture." They accepted this because they were my counsel, and it was their job to accept what I told them until I told them otherwise. But Asha's eyes, when I dismissed them, had the look of a woman doing arithmetic that does not yet add up. I returned to my private rooms and stood at the cold window and looked at the yard in the dark, where the pack lay sleeping in their loose configurations, some in the covered runs, some on the open ground, unbothered by the chill. Marit was at the eastern fence. She had been there since dusk. My wolf gave me no peace that night. I went to the yard before dawn. I am not sure what I intended. The king does not walk his own feeding yard at an hour before first light. There are handlers for that and protocols, and the entire apparatus of a functioning keep exists precisely so that the Alpha does not have to be everywhere. But I was not sleeping, and my wolf was insisting in that wordless, absolute way it has, and I put on my cloak and walked out. Marit met me at the gate. She pressed her great gray head against my hand, once, and then she turned and walked to the eastern fence and lay down facing the ridge path. I stood beside her in the dark. Senna came 20 minutes later. She did not see me at first, or if she did, she gave no sign of it. She walked her usual path, and when she drew level with the eastern fence she slowed, as she always did, and her eyes found the pack in the pre-dawn dimness. They found Marit first. Marit, who was lying at the fence with her enormous gray head resting on her forepaws, looking at Senna with the particular composed certainty of an animal who has decided. Senna stopped. She looked at Marit for a long moment. Then she crouched down at the fence so that she was at Merritt's eye level, and she did not reach through the rails, and she did not call to her. She simply met the old wolf's gaze with that unhurried quality of hers, the one that made things calm. Merritt exhaled a long, slow sound, almost like a word. "You're the oldest one," Senna said, very quietly as if talking to herself. "Aren't you?" She was not asking me. She did not know I was there yet. She was talking to Merritt the way you talk to something that you understand will not answer but that you know is listening. "You're tired," Senna said. "Not sick, just tired. You've been doing this a long time." Merritt made that sound again. "So have I," Senna said, and then after a pause, "though I imagine in different ways." I stood in the dark and felt something shift in me that I did not have a name for, some long-set thing, some mechanism that had been locked since before I could remember, moving for the first time on its foundation. My wolf did not vibrate or howl or do any of the dramatic things that the old songs attribute to the moment of recognition. It simply went still in the way that a door goes still when it finds the frame it was built to fit. I stepped forward out of the shadow of the gate post, and she saw me. She did not startle. She rose from her crouch and turned to face me with that same expression, present, unhurried, waiting without urgency, and she did not apologize for being here, which I had not asked her to. "My lord," she said. "You said you've been doing this a long time," I said. "Walking, moving from place to place." "Yes." "How long?" She considered it. 7 years since my father died. He was the one with a home. I followed him when he had work, and when he died the work became mine and the home became less certain. "You have no pack." "No." "You have not tried to attach yourself to one." "Packs have their own order," she said. "I don't fit neatly into an existing order. I've found it's easier for everyone if I keep moving." "My wolves do not agree," I said. Something crossed her face, not a smile, but a relative of one. "Your wolves are very certain of things," she said. "More certain than I am." "What are you uncertain of?" She looked at me with those calm, direct eyes. "Most things," she said. "Where I'm going, what I'm for. Whether there is somewhere I'm supposed to stop." The words landed in me the way the old she-wolf's exhalation had landed, quietly, without drama, and with a weight I felt in the center of my chest. "It is cold," I said. "You should not stand in the frost before dawn." "You're standing in it," she said. "I am the Alpha King of Veldreth," I said. "The frost is my territory. I have dominion over it." The relative of a smile came back, warmer this time. "I see," she said. "Does that apply to visiting travelers as well?" "I will consider extending the jurisdiction," I said. She laughed. It was a brief, real sound, the kind that is not performed for anyone's benefit, and it fell into the cold air between us, and Merritt lifted her head to look at us both. I had not made someone laugh like that, unguarded, genuine, surprised out of them, in longer than I wanted to calculate. "Come inside," I said. "I will have Bran bring something warm." She looked at me, and I could see her weighing it. Not my intentions, I thought, but her own. The old calculation of someone who has kept themselves light and portable for 7 years, who has learned not to step into things that will be difficult to step out of. "I shouldn't," she said. "My wolves will not eat until you do," I said. She looked at the yard, where 31 wolves were now awake and watching us with unified attention. "That is," she said, "a significant amount of pressure." "They are not known for subtlety," I said. She came inside. We sat at the small table in the antechamber off the main hall, the table I use for private meetings, not the long formal table of council, and Bran brought heated grain broth and bread and looked at me with an expression of careful neutrality that I recognized as his version of screaming. I received it with equal neutrality, and he withdrew. We talked. I do not know how long. The frost outside went gray and then pale gold as the sun came up behind the ridge, and the pack's sounds from the yard shifted from the quiet of early morning to the more animated sounds of wolves who have been fed and are now occupied with the ordinary business of their day. Senna talked about the western reaches, the settlements she had moved through, the particular knowledge of plants and roots and tending that her father had given her, the way different pack territories had different characters, the way you could learn a great deal about a kingdom from the behavior of the wildlife at its edges. I told her about Veldrath, not the governance, the arithmetic of a northern pack holding, the border agreements, the bloodline records Tomas kept with such meticulous care. I told her about the ridge in summer, when the pines smelled different, and the way the pack's dynamics shifted with the seasons, and the specific personality of Marit in cold weather versus warm weather, which was a topic I had never found occasion to discuss with anyone because it was, functionally, irrelevant to the running of a kingdom. It was not irrelevant to Senna. She asked questions that were not flattering questions, not questions designed to appear interested, but actual questions, the kind that come from genuine wanting to know. What did Marit eat differently in winter? Had there been a time when Marit and I had not trusted each other? What did the pack do when he was away from the territory? No one had asked me questions like that in 20 years. By the time she left, the sun was fully up and my council would be gathering for the morning meeting. I walked her to the longhouse door and she stepped out into the bright, cold morning and turned to look at me, that expression on her face, present, clear, unhurried. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For the broth," she said, "and for the conversation. I don't have many of those." "Nor do I," said, and I meant it in a way I had not anticipated meaning it, and she seemed to understand this because she was quiet for a moment before she nodded and turned down the path toward the settlement. I watched her go. My wolf watched with me and said nothing, because it had already said everything it needed to say and was simply waiting for me to catch up. The autumn court was a tradition older than my father's time. Every year in the third week after the first hard frost, the ranking families of the Veldrath territory and its neighboring holds gathered at the Longhouse for 3 days of formal proceedings, the reviewing of boundary agreements, the discussion of winter supply arrangements, the presentation of matters that required the Alpha's direct ruling, and inevitably, in the social hours between the formal sessions, the business of alliances. I had been at the center of the alliance business for years. My council had not given up on the matter despite my continued successful avoidance of any conclusion. This year, Asha had told me in her most precisely neutral tone there were 4 families presenting suitable candidates. The Gret envoy had arrived 2 days prior. The Veldmore delegation came the morning of the court's opening. 2 others followed by midday. I received them all with the composed courtesy that is the Alpha's public face, and I told them nothing they could use. But I was aware, throughout the first day's formal sessions, of something happening in the yard below the longhouse windows. My pack was awake and restless in a way that was not the restlessness of discomfort, the anxious circling of an unhappy animal, but the restlessness of waiting. The way a dog paces before its person comes home, directed, purposeful, aimed at something. Marit had not come in from the yard. Senna, at my request delivered through Bran that morning, had been given a place in the longhouse for the duration of the court. She had no formal standing and no role in the proceedings. I had simply told Bran that a guest of mine was to be made comfortable and was not to feel she was in the way. Bran had looked at me with that same carefully neutral expression and done as he was told. She sat in the back of the long hall during the open afternoon session. I was aware of her the way you are aware of a particular quality of light, not distracting, not demanding attention, simply present in a way that changed the character of the room slightly. I was the only one in the room who knew she was there, I thought. Then I noticed Tomas. Old Tomas, who had catalogued every wolf in Veldrath for 40 years, who had been doing this work since before I was born, had turned in his seat at the council table, and was looking at the back of the room. He had the expression of a man who has just seen a set of records confirm something he has suspected for a long time. The formal session ended. The hall began to move toward the evening gathering, the informal hours of food and discussion, where the alliance business actually happened, where the families circulated and presented their candidates with the particular performative casualness of people doing something they have rehearsed. I stood near the main hearth and received them in turn. The Gret daughter was accomplished. The Veldmore candidate was articulate and composed. I spoke with each of them with the full attention a king owes to a person who has made a long journey, and I felt nothing that I had not felt before. My wolf felt nothing either. I heard the sound from the yard before I understood what it was. Not a sound of distress, not the alarm call of the pack or the particular sharp sound that means a wolf is hurt. Something else. A sound the pack makes so rarely that it took me a moment to place it. Consensus, the sound of consensus. I crossed to the yard doors and opened them, and the gathered families followed, because the sound was impossible to ignore. It was woven through with a quality that made every head in the room turn toward it. The yard was full of wolves. All 31 of them, arranged in a loose half-circle facing the yard's eastern side. Marit was in the center of the half-circle, and Senna was standing at the edge of the yard, having stepped outside from a back door, and she was looking at the assembled pack with that clear, unhurried expression, and her hands were loose at her sides, and she had no idea what was about to happen. Marit walked to her. The hall had gone completely quiet. I was aware of the Gret daughter to my left and the Veldmore candidate behind me and a Shah at my elbow and Wren slightly further back, and I was aware of all of them the way you are aware of the weather, present, real, irrelevant to the most important thing currently happening. Marit walked to Senna and sat before her. Then she lowered her great gray head and laid it in Senna's lap. Senna's hands came up slowly and rested on either side of Marit's skull, not gripping, not petting, just resting, the way you hold something you understand to be irreplaceable. The mate mark burned to life on my left wrist. I felt it the way you feel the moment when a fever breaks, not dramatic, not sudden, but the cessation of something that has been building for so long you had almost stopped recognizing it as a building. A warmth that spread from my wrist up through my arm and settled in my chest, and my wolf, which had been listening for weeks, exhaled. I looked at my wrist. The mark was the old shape, the interlocking forms that the bloodline records described, that Tomas had catalogued in every mated pair in Veldrath's history. I had seen it in photographs in the old records. I had never expected to see it on my own skin. I crossed the yard. The pack moved to let me through, not scattering but parting, the way water parts around something that belongs in it. I walked through them and I stopped before Senna, and she looked up from Marit's head in her lap, and her eyes went to my wrist, and I watched the understanding move through her face. The slow, unmistakable comprehension of someone seeing something they had not known was possible. "Senna," I said. "I don't understand," she said. Her voice was quiet and it was steady, and it was not the steadiness of someone controlling themselves. It was simply who she was. "My wolf has understood since the first morning," I said. "I have been slower." She looked at the mark. Then she looked at me. Behind us, the hall was entirely silent, the families, the council, the envoys, the entirety of the autumn court, and Marit's weight lay across her lap with the absolute certainty of a very old wolf who has done what she came out here to do and is now resting. "I came here to pass through," Senna said. "I don't have a name in your world. Your council," she glanced toward the door where I knew a Shah was standing. "They will have objections." "They will," I said. "They are good at their work, and their work is to tell me the things I should consider. I have considered them." I looked at her face, the clear, calm eyes, the quality of her that made frightened things still, that had stopped my pack in its tracks on an ordinary morning and not let it go. "You said you did not know where you were going. whether there was somewhere you were supposed to stop. She was quiet. You have stopped, I said. You can't know that, she said. You don't know me, not really. We sat at a table for a few hours. We have talked at a fence. My pack knows you, I said. Merritt knows you. I have never in my life had better counsel than those two taken together. I paused. And I know that you have been in this settlement for 3 weeks and you have not once asked me for anything. You are the only person in this yard, in this hall, in this court, who has come here without wanting something from me. I met her eyes. I find that I want to give you things anyway. I am not sure what to do with that. Something moved through her face, not the relative of a smile this time, but the thing itself, real and unguarded and brief. That's very honest, she said. I am attempting to be, I said. I am not always good at it. It has not generally been required of me. No, she said, I imagine not. Will you let me learn? I asked. That is all I am asking, not a declaration, not an arrangement. Only, will you stay long enough for me to learn? Merritt shifted under her hands, pressing up slightly, the old wolf's version of emphasis. Senna looked at her, then she looked at me. My lord, she said, and the formality of it was the last formal distance between us, deliberate, acknowledged, and on its way to gone. I have been walking for 7 years. I'm fairly tired. Then rest, I said. Veldrath has room. Behind us, the pack moved. They did not howl and they did not circle. They simply settled, in the way of animals who have accomplished what they set out to do, sinking down onto the cold ground of the yard with the quiet authority of things that know the work is done. Asha came to my side that evening. She was not a woman who delivered apologies, and I was not waiting for one. But she stood with me at the window above the yard where Merritt was still lying, her great head across Senna's knee as Senna sat on the yard bench in the cold, apparently unbothered by the temperature, talking to the old wolf about something I could not hear through the glass. Tomas knew, Asha said. He looked at her and he knew. Tomas has been watching for this kind of thing for 40 years, I said. The Gret family was gracious, she said, under the circumstances. Good, I said. The Gret family has always been good for Veldrath. I intend to keep that relationship. And the Veldmore alliance is a trade alliance, I said, and it does not require anyone to marry into it. Asha was quiet for a moment. She has no name here, she said, no lineage in our records. She will have my name, I said, and my name is the oldest lineage in this territory, and that will do. Asha considered this with the air of someone doing arithmetic that has now, finally, resolved. She'll need things, she said. Clothes appropriate to the longhouse, introduction to the holding staff, someone to walk her through the record-keeping. She should understand what she's coming into. She's already more capable than most people I know, I said, but yes, she will need those things. I will see to it, Asha said. And then after a pause, she calmed Merritt. In 11 years no one has calmed Merritt. I know, I said. Your father always said the wolves knew first. I know that too, I said. I should have listened earlier. Asha looked out the window at the yard, at the woman on the bench and the old wolf resting across her lap, the frost settling at the edges of the yard in the last of the evening light. Well, she said, with the particular dryness of a woman who has been doing difficult work for a long time and has learned to find peace with the results, you are the Alpha King of Veldrath. I suppose you arrived in reasonable time. She left. I stayed at the window. Below in the yard, Senna had looked up as if she could feel me watching. She found the window. She did not wave. She was not a woman who waved. She simply met my eyes through the glass in that direct way of hers, and the mark on my wrist was warm and steady. I had governed Veldrath for 20 years by the law I learned before I could walk. Name what you see. Know what you hold. I could name this now. In the days that followed, she moved through the longhouse the way she moved through everything, without rushing, without demanding that the world rearrange itself around her arrival, simply present in each place she came to in a way that made the place itself feel more settled. The holding staff, who had been braced for the complicated adjustment that comes with any significant change in a keep, found themselves unexpectedly at ease. She learned their names before they had to offer them twice. She asked about their work with the same quality of genuine interest she had applied to my wolves, to the pine trees on the ridge, to the fracture in the ridge wall stone. Marit, for her part, could now be found at Senna's heel for a significant portion of each day. The other wolves, taking their cue from the eldest as wolves always do, had adjusted their behavior accordingly. The pack's morning routine was once again regular, but the eastern fence still pulled them, not from unmet need but from habit, and Senna still walked it each morning, and I walked it with her now, in the cold before the settlement woke, our breath clouding in the pine-scented air while the wolves followed the fence line in their loose, unhurried way. She asked me, one of those mornings, what I had thought the first time I had seen her at the fence. That you were a variable I could not name, I said. And now, I said, you are the only variable in this kingdom I have stopped trying to manage. She walked in silence for a moment, the frost crunching softly underfoot. That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. I am still learning, I said. You're doing well, she said. The formal claiming was a matter of court record, the announcement before the assembled settlement, the presentation to the pack, the logging in Tomas's bloodline records of a name and a date and the shape of a mark. Tomas was meticulous about the shape. He spent 20 minutes sketching it with the same care he had given every other entry in his 40 years of records, and when he was done, he looked at it, and then at Senna with the expression of a very old man whose arithmetic has come out right after a long time of carrying remainders. The ranking families sent their acknowledgments. The Gret family sent a gift, good, warm wool from their southern holdings, practical and generous, which told me more about the Gret family's actual character than a decade of formal proceedings had managed to. The Veldmore delegation, true to their word, signed the trade accord before they rode south, and their senior envoy shook my hand with the uncomplicated warmth of someone who is simply glad a thing has been resolved. Asha oversaw Senna's introduction to the holdings records with the precise efficiency of a woman who has been waiting for this job and intends to do it well. Senna absorbed it the way she absorbed everything, steadily, without drama, asking the questions that mattered and filing the answers in some internal record that I suspected was more accurate than half my written ones. The pack's formal presentation was in the last light of an afternoon when the sky had gone the particular deep amber gold of a northern autumn dusk, and the pine trees on the ridge were dark against it, and the yard was cold and quiet and full of wolves. Marit stood at the front, as she always stood at the front of the significant things, and Senna stood beside me, and I said the words that the Alpha has said on these occasions in Veldrath since before the Longhouse was built. The words that are not a vow of possession but a declaration of recognition. I have found what I did not know I was looking for, and I will spend what remains of my life being worthy of it. Marit pressed against Senna's leg. The pack settled. The amber light came down through the pines and lay across the yard. Years from now, when Tomas's successor opens the bloodline records to the entry he made that autumn, they will find the date and the shape of the mark and the names, my name and hers, and a note in Tomas's meticulous hand that reads, "The pack knew on the first morning." The Alpha followed in good time. The wolves were, as always, right. He was not wrong. She had come to my fence looking for nothing. She had stood in the frost and talked to my oldest wolf about being tired, and she had not known that I was listening, and she had not performed it for my benefit. It had simply been true. That was the thing about Senna. Everything was simply true. She did not have the vocabulary for performance or the patience for it or the need. She had walked through 7 years and a dozen settlements, and she had arrived at my fence with no angle and no plan and no asking. And my pack had recognized in the first 5 minutes what took me 3 weeks, and a burning mark on my wrist to acknowledge. I have governed Veldrath for 20 years by certainty, by naming things. I know what I hold now. Every morning before the settlement wakes, we walk the eastern fence in the cold. The pack follows. Marit walks between us. The frost is mine by dominion and hers by right, and the difference has become, over time, impossible to locate. That, I have decided, is exactly the right kind of confusion to live in for the rest of a life.